Listen, Meltzer's reporting that there were some upset folks. I guess you guys were asking for like 50 or even $100 raises, and talent was being told no. And I know when you met with the talent and told them, hey, we're going to do 3 live shows and 1 tape show a month, our old pal Road Dog said, we're going to start running house shows. And you said no. And allegedly, the idea that you're out here negotiating with Kevin Nash and Hulk Hogan and Johnny Fairplay's here, that's rubbing some guys the wrong way who've been turned down for that 25 or 50 or $100 raise. Um, is it a tightrope? Is it a balancing act of, how do you justify to a guy who is on the team and is asking for $100? No, can't do it. And then here comes, for all intents and purposes, a non-wrestler like Johnny Fairplay. I get it because you're looking to create eyeballs and draw new people in. But I'm sure there were some hurt feelings from guys who were like, hey, wait a minute, I actually wrestle and I can't get $100, but he can come in. I'm sure you had some uncomfortable conversations, no?
To relate it to some thoughts that I've had, just retrospective, and I'm going to go back to Sting and the Jarretts and just kind of just really go back to 30,000 feet viewpoint, or even 50,000. When you kind of look at Sting and Greensboro Coliseum and that, the match that put him on the map, and the kind of money the guys were making in the late 80s, and then WCW wasn't setting the world on fire in the early 90s. But when you kind of look, when our pal EB rolled in there and Ted Turner, the billionaire, started pumping money in, which in turn pushed WWF at the time, and the big money that, here's where I'm going with it. Scott and Kevin jump with big guaranteed contracts. Can you imagine the position Sting was in at that time?
Right.
Because he immediately goes, now, wait a minute. I've been here 10 years and I don't think I'm mating that. Well, of course, Eric's going to say, yep, I'm going to bump you up. I don't want to get into contracts, but on a very, 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 very much smaller scale, that was our set of circumstances, that we've got our core there. And we're like, hey, man, can I get 50 more bucks or 100 more bucks? And we're having to say, we're growing this thing. So no. But then they hear, on the other hand, they're talking to Lex and China and Johnny Fairplay, and we got a couple other names in here in just the wild, wild west of the early days of TNA. Yes, talent relations, specifically with creative and cash, is always a hell of a balancing act. It's always going to be that way, even in the guaranteed deals, because then you always are striving to get to the top of the card for 2 reasons. The creative part of it and the cash part of it.
Let's talk a little bit about the China story, because Meltzer would say, add Joni Lauer to the crew here. She debuts on the 18th and looks to be doing a program with woman hater Johnny Fairplay. The original plan was for Roddy Piper to confront Fairplay on that show and lead to a match on April 4th. But apparently Piper wasn't up to doing a program with Fairplay as they figured he might be. Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which was a location being considered, is also still not a done deal. Randy Savage's people, since his name got out, noted that Savage has not agreed to any deal at this point. Savage is 51 and he hasn't wrestled in several years. He pulled out of his last high profile appearance just days before it was supposed to happen. That was the WWA pay-per-view in Las Vegas 2 years ago. Like Hogan, unless there's a signed contract, something can go wrong. It also should be noted that that show was built around Savage and it did no business on pay-per-view. So Savage by himself is no savior. So listen, we're sort of running through all the ways that Dave thinks maybe we can get a shot in the arm here. And he's saying, might not be Savage, but having conversations with the former China and the former Macho Man, or the current Macho Man, goodness gracious, those are big opportunities. What can you tell us about those?
So Savage, who was this when his music career was being launched? Because
Be a Man, Hulk, and all that. Yeah.
Well, and you know what was crazy in my mind? I was thinking when we were talking to Randy at this stage of the game. He was older, but at this time he was only 51. Well, it's easy for me to say only 51, right? But I don't know, for some reason in my mind, I was thinking he was early 60s, but he wasn't. But yes, again, I referred to a second ago as the Wild Wild West of the TNA days. But when we were running the Wednesday night pay-per-views, the marketing of our shows on, we'll call it on a national set of circumstances, was so damn difficult. I don't even want to get in, say it's an exact science. It's the most inexact science ever. But China, obviously coming off not just my history with her in the ring, but just her stature in the business. At the time, Russo had a good relationship with her, and I think Vince was talking to her. My gut tells me my dad had probably rekindled off and on the conversations with Savage. Johnny Fairplay, I don't know exactly how that came to the table. I don't know if it was Jeremy Borash or a combination of JB and some others. I don't know exactly how Johnny got to the table, but you know, sitting back and trying to figure out the exact months and days and weeks and looking at the research, at the end of the day, we were trying to create that Saturday morning Memphis TV or whatever, however you want to say it, that we were trying to create excitement with one-offs, but our mainstays were AJ and America's Most Wanted and X Division and whatever it may be. We didn't have a women's division yet. With the Knockouts division wasn't created. So we had our core, and then we wanted to bring different talent in to make a splash every week, if you will.
Well, make a splash they were. I mean, this is going to get everybody buzzing, that's for sure. Let's talk about an angle that you shot that maybe got a little bit of attention. Ever since its debut, when the company hired country music star Toby Keith and NASCAR drivers Hermie Sadler and Sterling Marlin, the NWA TNA has been trying to do anything to get some mainstream pub. Keith got a brief mention in the USA Today and some country TV clips when he suplexed Jeff Jarrett. Marlin, a huge star in his world, and Sadler, another well-known, almost mainstream name, almost got no publicity. The company's next attempt at publicity backfired when several media were interested in the story of Zach Gowen, the one-legged wrestler. But Gowen walked out and signed with WWE, which ended up getting little publicity because it went from heartwarming story to ugly exploitative story because of how Vince McMahon used Gowen to get himself over. But the biggest attempt was signing John Dalton to a 1-year contract, and ultimately as a publicity stunt, which was just a total flop. Ironically, Chicago Bears linebacker Brian Urlacher, a good friend of Eric Watts, was able to be talked into doing something physical, and TNA got more publicity than they bargained for when it turned into a Chicago controversy about a guy with a $56 million 9-year contract risking injury to do the angle. Urlacher's role at the January pay-per-view was being attacked by Kevin Northcutt and Joe Legend, doing the duck a double clothesline, coming off the ropes with a clothesline on both spots. He then pressed Johnny Fairplay over his head and threw him over the top rope on the Northcutt. This got a ton of publicity. Brian Urlacher doing a little run-in for you guys. Do you remember getting some heat over all this?
Oh boy. And I was looking at reading the research when I thought about Toby, obviously the suplex, and that, look, in Toby's world, it got massive play, and that's in the country music world, and that's no small world. In the NASCAR world, Sterling Marlin and Hermie Sadler, that just didn't get one hit. That kind of got multiple hits. Hermie, not just a friend of the show and a friend of the family, but I mean, he knew how to navigate all that PR, and it got, in that world, a ton of press. Both of those worlds aren't in Keller or Meltzer, or it's not in the wrestling world. It's completely out of lanes, all that. So they weren't aware of how much it generated. Now that, to everyone's look, did they generate a boatload of revenue? Probably not, but awareness, yes, they were both well done. When it got to Urlacher, correct, a buddy of Eric Watts in that spot, if you can go on the app and check this episode out. But Urlacher in his prime, hitting the ropes 100 miles an hour like a Braun Breaker. I mean, and I'm just like, ooh, doesn't quite know how to do this. Slow down in there. But Connie, the amount of behind the scenes maneuvering, the Bears were livid. And somebody from Dallas, I don't think it was Bob, called and basically said, now, didn't y'all learn y'all's lesson after the TNA situation? Because that got the offensive line, Frank Wycheck and Zach and others, they got called in the carpet and had to talk to not just the coach, but the general manager and the attorney and the Titan management. They were upset about it. Later, Pac-Man, that got an ugly situation. But Urlacher and the Bears, they were livid, and they put a clause in his contract at this time that he could not do, I mean, a number of things, and had to get approval for just about anything other than playing football. But yes, it got quite a bit of news locally in Chicago. It got some national, but a lot in Chicago and Nashville, of course. But yeah, my man wasn't worried about reporting back to his Bears coaches that, like, I'll handle it, don't worry about it, because we did ask him about it. I'm kind of forgetting that part. We're like, hey, man, are you approved to do this? Oh, yeah, it's all good. Well, he wasn't.